Welcome, everyone, to tonight's YouTube live show. Going to talk a little bit USF football history tonight. I'm your host, Chad Berger, and tonight I am fortunate to be joined by a USF living legend. Kurtiss Riggs is here with me tonight, and so I'm going to talk a little bit with Kurtiss about his time at USF. So thank you so much for joining me tonight, Kurtiss.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I think us trying to compete with Michael Jordan and The Last Dance is a true test of the show, but I'm willing to give it my best shot.
Yeah, we'll see what we can do. So, Kurtiss, you played high school football in Green River, Wyoming, correct?
I did. Yep.
And you graduated in 92 or 93?
Yep, 92.
92, okay. So how does a left-handed quarterback from Green River, Wyoming end up coming out to Sioux Falls College at the time?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's one I often wonder about. A lot of things fell into place. And I think that's how recruiting goes. I like now that I have an academy and work with these high school kids, as they start to get letters from certain levels, then they instantly believe they're going that level. And so at the time, I was fortunate. I had a very proactive high school coach who really felt like I could play college football. And he sent my info and film to a lot of schools. And so I ended up getting a lot of feedback from a lot of different schools in our area, like Wyoming and Utah and BYU and Utah State. And I would go to camp at Northern Colorado with Coach Joe Glenn, who I loved Coach Glenn. And I really thought that's where I'd end up going. But then as the recruiting happens and you start to learn as it's time for, to make those final decisions, you start to get these, hey, we really want you to come walk on. And I was like, geez, I don't want to go be a human pinata for a couple years and then maybe get a play. And then Coach Glenn called me and told me he took a Colorado kid over me, and it just would be best if I went somewhere else. And it was about this time that Coach Young came strolling in with he had a big ring on from their '88 season that I thought was pretty flashy. And then a kid from Green River, Brian Brooks, was at University of Sioux Falls, or Sioux Falls College at that time. And so, we had a pretty good football tradition in Green River, and we had teammates at Shoutouts State, we had teammates at Black Hills State, and we had teammates now at Sioux Falls College. So my teammates and I thought we would make a trip of it and go to Shoutouts, to Black Hills, and then all the way out to Sioux Falls. And when we went to Shoutouts and then Black Hills and then Sioux Falls, we knew right away, for the longevity of making it through college, Sioux Falls College with Coach Young. And for me, if I was going to go to an NAIA school, I really wanted to play basketball and baseball also. Those were pretty important to me. And I really liked Coach Vanderstreek, but I knew for longevity of lasting in college and not getting involved with all the extracurricular activities outside of sports, Sioux Falls College was the best choice. And so I made the choice to come out there, and thankful I did.
That's awesome. So you came to high school. You came here right out of high school, Kurtiss?
Yeah. Yep. I came right out of high school, and I redshirted, which was a rarity. My class, when we came in, Damon Olson and myself were the only two that redshirted. everyone else played. And in fact, I think Damon and I were the only two that made it all the way through all 5 years. Everyone else, either played their 4 years and left, or, it's just the way it works, especially in college sports. A lot of guys, life happens and they move on. And so Damon and I redshirted, and that was rough. That was really rough. I didn't think I was going to make it because the football was really bad. And I thought, what have I got myself into? And I thought I was going to transfer to Wyoming. In fact, I had gone back and a name you might remember, Coach Mike Van Dees. He was my recruiting coordinator before he went on to go coach at Carroll College. He was my recruiting coordinator at Wyoming, and I drove back to Wyoming where my wife was going to school, and met with Coach Van Dees and was going to go back to Wyoming and be that tackling dummy that I didn't want to do. And then my wife came to USF, visited, and decided to come up and play basketball and volleyball. And I thought I'd stay, give it another try, and thankful it worked out.
Yeah. So hopefully my signal is hanging in there. Okay. And you can hear me.
Yeah.
So it was pretty atypical, as you mentioned, for guys to redshirt back in those days. I mean, I don't, a whole lot of guys didn't do it, but it was starting to become popular. Remind us who kind of were some of the quarterbacks that you learned from, or did you play other positions as well while you were redshirting that year?
Well, when I redshirted, you kind of did anything and everything. So in practice, I bet I played every single position, and I usually would go over to the scout team to give a look in some way. We had some freakishly athletic players. I mean, Lamont Carrington, Ryan Miller. We were extremely gifted, but we had zero discipline and we had zero accountability. And we just had guys where they were talented, but football was secondary for them at that point in their lives. But one guy that was very disciplined and into it was a quarterback who I greatly respected, Craig Clayberg, who is now the coach at T. But I always marveled at, I'm like, you wear number 26. How can you be a quarterback and wear number 26? But then when I watched him play and saw how he had to run for his life every play, I figured out that's how he got that number. Because he could run around, but he had to. He had very little protection and didn't have much of a chance to stand back there and throw.
So then the following season, the 93 season, probably was one of the, rougher seasons record-wise. I think that was the last year that USF had a losing record, actually. And I think you guys finished up with 2 wins that season. Yep. Was that kind of, here you thought about going back to Wyoming, and then you come back to Sioux Falls, and then your freshman year, you guys just can't really win a whole lot of games. I mean, that had to be pretty tough.
Yeah, it was tough. And I wasn't playing either. So it made it more difficult. My redshirt year, we had we had an all conference receiver in Jay Eisness, and Jay decided to move over and play quarterback. And at that time, Coach Young, he only knew one thing, and that was the dive option. Well, he knew I guess 2 things. He knew dive option and trap.
Trap.
Yep. And that was about the 2 things he knew. And really our passing game at that time was play action or 3-step. And that was the extent of what Coach Young really knew for his repertoire on throwing. Well, that didn't fit very well with me and my style. So he went with what he knew best. And Jay was a much better option quarterback. He was very athletic, very good leader. And so we had some tools that we thought we could make work. It's just we couldn't win games. And so I was a backup, and I used to drive Coach Young crazy that season and the next season, because when I came in, I would not run the play. I would check out of the play, and I would throw it. And when he would yell at me, I'd be like, Coach, I want to play too. Are you telling me I can't play? And he didn't have many responses for me, but it was tough. It was hard. I moved around. I played a lot of different spots, but I wasn't overly athletic to play other positions. I could throw, and that was about it. And it didn't fit us well at that time.
So you mentioned you also wanted to play basketball and baseball, and that was part of the reason that you came to Sioux Falls College at the time. How was the basketball and baseball team doing, around that time as well?
Well, basketball was going really well. In fact, it was going better for me than I thought. I was able to play. I played JV basketball, and then I got moved up to the varsity and played in one of our playoff games. And when we had a phenomenal team, we had Stacy Koistra, Gary Arrington, Chad Bent, Kim Hofer. How we were so good, but so was the rest of back then it was the SDIC, and it was really a talented conference back then. But it was fun. It was a good time. Baseball was just starting up, and we went through some really rocky roads there with our first coaches they brought in. And then when they brought in a guy named Jim Denovan, he really created some stability. And then to get someone like Kalen, who you could really showcase with the baseball team, they were able to do some good things. So that was fun. That was finally about our senior years when baseball kind of took off at USF. But basketball was good throughout. They were always really good.
So one of the things I'm going to ask you, a lot of athletes, younger athletes nowadays, think that they need to, really dive into one sport and become, focus on that sport, that key sport that they think is going to earn them a college scholarship. You just told the story that you ended up playing 3 varsity sports at the collegiate level.
Yeah, I did track too.
Oh, 4.
Yeah. I got ringed into that one. Coach Young was just trying to find more ways to get me scholarship money, and Coach Greeno was one of the best humans ever. Coach Greeno, you just couldn't get angry or argue anything with him. Just such a genuine, nice man. He talked me into throwing the javelin, so I would go and throw javelin, which it was entertaining. And back then it was very common for a lot of the athletes to do multiple sports, though.
Right. Yeah. I know I threw the shot put with a bunch of fellow linemen back in the day.
Sure.
And everything else. But, I mean, do you think if you played now that you would have had those opportunities to play multiple sports at the collegiate level?
No. I think that's kind of it's almost becoming extinct. The game is becoming more of a job and more year round. And even for like Kalen and I, as we became more competitive with football, we wanted to commit more of our time to that. It pulled us away more from basketball, and it just got to where it became there was a time where Coach Vanderstreek was tough, man. He was hard nosed, and we lost a tough game at Mitchell at Dakota Wesleyan. And we came back and we practiced when we got back to Sioux Falls, and we ran, and we're running, and he finally goes, "All right, you football guys, you guys can go if you want." And we didn't even hesitate. We walked right off, and the rest of those basketball guys had to keep running. And that's kind of when Kalen and I and one other guy, we knew it was probably about time to start to focus just on football. But now it becomes so specialized for kids. I encourage all my athletes, so play as many sports as long as you can. But then when it's time to make that decision, you'll know. It'll be where you're getting all this input on everything, and to really excel, you maybe need to specialize. But I tell them throughout high school, do them all.
All right, you heard it here. So let's go back to your playing. 93, 94, you didn't see, a whole lot of action on the field in those seasons. And then what changed? Obviously 95, you became the quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
What happened between 94 and 95 there?
Well, the biggest change was Jay Woo Sim, who I knew Jay Woo. Jay Woo was the D coordinator when I came in as a freshman. And
okay.
You gravitate to his personality, but I could never understand what he was saying. But I was always greatly amused by him. But then he left. He went and coached at Augie. He went and coached Brian Schwartz, and then Coach Young said, "Well, he's got a really good friend at Boise State. He's learning the pass game from him. He wants to bring that back and implement it here." And and thankfully he did. And that would be the big change for me, was when Coach Young passed the offense over to Jay Woo Sim, and it fit me perfectly. We were able to call all our plays at the line, 3-step, 5-step. Everything was timing, passing, and then we were able to just get a great mix of guys that fit inside that system.
Yeah, so obviously, with that system, when you change from running an option scheme to passing the ball a little bit more, did you have a whole lot of wide receivers that were around, or did you have to go out and bring a bunch of guys in at the time?
Yeah, we didn't have anyone that would make you think, wow, that guy's we had Kalen. Kalen had a good season previously, but really no one else. So we're very young, inexperienced. Jeremy Gardner at tight end, Mike Nelson. We had a lot of area kids from South Dakota and Wyoming. It was more about roles and knowing what the defense was doing. And then Jay Woo was so good at making sure we were prepared. Back then, defenses lined up exactly how they were supposed to, and you knew exactly where they were going to be. You could come up and know exactly what they were in and where they were going to go. And so we would come up, see what they were in, and we had 4 or 5 plays for that set, and we would rattle them off. And it pretty much became like clockwork for us.
Yeah. That's so the 95 season, obviously, you came in, you guys started rolling right away. Some pretty big wins, and then you ended up with an undefeated regular season.
Yep, we did. Yeah, we were we didn't really realize how good we were. We just, because we had won before, but to get this far now and really not have a whole lot of competition in the conference was new to us, and now to start to branch out and play other teams was a big deal for us.
Yeah, so then in the opening round of that playoffs, you guys went, or did you go to Hastings, or was that in Sioux Falls?
No, we went to Hastings.
To Hastings, yep. Which is a nice bus ride there, 6-hour bus ride for you.
Yeah.
And you knocked those guys off pretty handily. And then in the second round, you ended up going up to Mary up in Bismarck.
Yeah, they were good. They were really big, physical. They were a very talented team, and we were pretty awestruck by that. They came out and they looked like grown men. We kind of had the North Dakota. We played in the playoffs the year before, but a crazy story though. The year before, you could shoot 53 guys for your playoff roster, and we only had 35 guys. That was it. So when they named all the guys off before the game, they get to our 35th guy, and they continue to name all of Minot State's guys. We were so beat up that game. That Kalen had broke his collarbone. We just had a slew of injuries. And so I had to start at corner, and in that game, I played corner, I played tailback, I played wide receiver, I caught punts, and the rule was, Coach Underwood was such a genius, but he's like, Kurtiss, as soon as the ball is kicked off the punter's foot, you start fair catching that thing right away. But I was the only guy at that time that could catch a punt. So it was kind of, no one left and go out there and do it. So we got beat. It was a tough game, but we kind of understood the mentality in North Dakota and their style of football. But they just got after us, and I played terrible. I had a terrible game at Mary, and I threw a couple bad interceptions in the second half that cost us.
Well, geez, sorry I brought that up, Kurtiss. I didn't want to bring up bad memories here.
Oh, yeah, it's part of the game.
So obviously, after that 95 season, you guys, you had a little bit of a bad taste in your mouth, and then you came in 96 and you brought a bunch of guys back. So, I mean, how did you feel kind of coming back for the 96 season?
We felt very good. Yeah, we didn't lose many guys at all. And we knew we had a really nice core of guys, and we knew we were more experienced now. And guys like Chuck Morrell transferring from USD, additions like that really helped put us over the top, and we knew we were good that year.
So going into the season, I think you guys started off the season just absolutely obliterating people. I've got the scores here on my phone if I could bring them up, but it was really not even close. The first game of the year, you won 58-6 over Concordia. The second game of the year, 42-12 over Jamestown, 49-29 over Midland, 50-14 over Huron. You're just destroying everyone. And then you play Westmar, and I don't remember where it was. That might have been down there, and only won 20-13. So that was kind of the first tough test that you guys had that season.
Yeah, they were good. They were a really good team that could never play to their potential, but they were so athletic. They had a lot of drop-down kids, and the coaches there, the Minich brothers, were coaching there then, and they were really good at getting transfers and drop-downs, but they were a lot like us in the early years, just really undisciplined. And that's what was their fatal flaw. But, yeah, we squeaked one out there. That was a tough game.
Yeah. What a former future NFL offensive coordinator, guy's name isn't coming to my mind right now, but he was on their coaching staff that year too.
Yeah, they had an impressive staff and an impressive group of players too.
Yeah.
It was one of the few games, though, we never played the fourth quarter. A lot of the USF teams for many years. I mean, you didn't get that opportunity to play in the fourth quarter, and finally we had to, and thankfully the guys buckled down and we got the win.
Yeah. So then the next couple games, you put up a few more 50-pointers against Dakota State and Black Hills State, and then you go out to Rapid City and play South Dakota School of Mines in a blizzard. So I've heard this story from several different people, but I've never heard it, from your perspective. So what happened in that game?
Yeah, it was the worst thing I've ever been a part of, ever. It's one of those ones where you're like, well, there's no way we're gonna play in this, and sure enough, Sid comes in. He's like, we can't find their AD anywhere. He said we're playing, and so we start playing. The winds, it's 50-mile-an-hour winds, straight blizzard. They quit trying to clear the snow on the field, so the entire game was played in 30 yards because you couldn't punt. And pretty much it was a successful play if you could just get the ball from center. I'll never forget, at halftime, the power went out, so there was no scoreboard, there was nothing. And we go in the locker room at halftime, and it's pitch black, and everyone is just shivering. We're huddled so close together trying to stay warm, and some of us had such a genius idea that, let's keep our feet warm and put our feet in bags in our shoes, not realizing that our feet are going to sweat and freeze. So we had guys that had frostbite after the game. No. And it was terrible. Everything you hear about that one is pretty much true. It's not one of those ones that the story gets more grandiose as time goes on. It's about right with that one. It was one that would never be played today. But the AD, Dakota Wesleyan and Black Hills State were playing that same day, and they canceled theirs and they played the next day in sunshine, and we played it out, and thankfully Travis Dumpke got that safety.
Wow. Yeah, the final score was 8-6.
Yeah, we took it down and scored our first drive, and it was all about who had the wind at their back. And then later on, I can't remember when it was, but we couldn't get out at all. And so we had to go for it on our own 3-yard line, and they were able to get a touchdown. And then we pinned them back in the fourth quarter, and they tried to reverse. The snow was so deep, you couldn't do anything laterally. And they tried to reverse, and Travis was able to tackle him in the end zone for a safety. That's a guy where many people don't realize how athletic and talented that guy was, Travis Dumpke. He was a physical freak, especially back in that day.
Yeah. I picked him for my all-time USF team as one of the defensive linemen. He was
yeah, you know, he was 6'5", 290, and he could run a 4.8. I mean, he was as fast as anyone else, and he was as volatile as anyone else too. And I was all about pushing his buttons in practice. But boy, I was glad he was on our team.
Yeah. So I'm going to kind of stop for a second here. So you guys only played like 2 home games the whole 1996 season, right?
Yeah, 2. One at Brandon Valley and one at Howard Wood.
Yeah, without even having a home field. That was just absolutely insane. So did that kind of bring the team closer together, just playing all those road games and all those bus trips and everything else?
Yeah, it was good. I mean, we traveled well. We got caught in a scheduling conflict where after our 95 season, people knew we were good, and they would only schedule us if we would go there. And we said, yeah, we'll go wherever. It didn't matter. And so it worked out. It was fine.
Yeah. So I was an offensive line guy. Who were some of the guys that played up front in front of you during that 96 season?
Well, one, just got put in the Hall of Fame, Andy Harrell, out of Torrington, Wyoming. Great offensive lineman, great player. The best was my center, Travis Eldridge. He was the rock for us. And then we had Mark Hansen at guard and Brad Schroeder at guard, and then Rob Shaw at tackle. I mean, we had 5 linemen. That's it. We had 1 sophomore backup, Rudy. And how ironic. His name's Rudy. And he had to play 1 game against Dakota State, but we had 0 depth. And that was usually the case at USF. You usually had, 7 offensive. We had 6. And it was really 5.5 is what we were getting by with. Yeah,
that's crazy. I remember one year in spring ball when I played, it was a few years after you, but we could only play half line for team because we only had 3 offensive linemen there.
Yeah.
Oh, those are the times, huh? So then you guys went out the next week and put up 65 on Nebraska Wesleyan. And I'm trying to think if that was the game when you set the school record for touchdown passes in a game or not.
Yeah. Yep. I think it was. And actually we got up big, and then they kind of made a little bit of a run, and Coach Young let us go back in, or it was actually Jay Wu. Jay Wu would do that. And then we didn't play most of the fourth quarter there either. They were persistent on just playing tight man coverage, and we were just clicking on all cylinders, and we would do just enough to keep Reuter involved, but I mean we had a lot of really good weapons back then that we could spread it around to.
Yeah, you mentioned David Reuter. How awesome was that guy? Holy cow!
Oh, he was great. Yeah, I mean, we probably held him back by throwing it as much as we did, and he would be the first one to never complain. The guy was so unselfish and just complete team player. I mean, anything to win a game.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to play with 1 year with Dave too, and I love that guy. He's awesome. So you finished out the regular season, putting up 55 on Dakota Wesleyan, who, back in the early to mid 90s, Dakota Wesleyan was kind of the Sioux Falls College USF big rival in conference. So it must have felt pretty good putting up 55 on those guys.
Yeah, I had watched us lose to Dakota Wesleyan, and a lot of the teams in our conference had seen us lose to. So Yeah, you could kind of see us going a different direction than where Dakota Wesleyan was going at that time.
Yeah. Well, in the playoffs, you guys got to play Mary in the first round. So the team that knocked you out the year before, that you just mentioned a few minutes ago, that you threw a couple bad picks against and probably had your worst game of your career against, and then you get to play them again in the first round. What was that like?
It was awful, actually. We woke up in the morning and it was a blizzard. We thought, oh my gosh. In fact, Reuter was the one that was writing us off. He was like, this is going to be awful. And then the game started, and my first two passes of the game were interceptions. I hadn't thrown an interception the entire regular season, and my first two passes were picks. Then Jay Wu actually was like, hey, let's maybe get Reuter on track here. And he erupted. He ran for 300 and some yards, completely carried us, and just he all by himself, he and the offensive line, they did a great job. It was like they were the only ones that had traction on that field, and they just destroyed Mary.
Huh. Did they have that carpet turf still back then?
No, we had a grass field. It was frozen, but they had grass.
The second round, you guys played Northwestern down in Orange City and beat them pretty handily, 52-21. How were the field conditions down in Orange City the following week?
Yeah, so in their game before, they played and it was freezing rain, and so they had no grass. So they brought in dirt, and they put dirt. We played on a dirt. It was complete dirt that they brought in that week. It was really a weird situation, but we just destroyed it. Coach Young was so nervous for that game. I mean, just the Northwestern thing with him, and he was so nervous. And we knew we matched up really well with them. In fact, Jay Wu even he even said we're going to get after these guys, and our defense came out hot right away. They just lit them up. Travis had a great game, and so we got after Northwestern.
Yeah, 52-21 was the final of that one. Then you played Evangel in the semifinals, and that was, other than the game we mentioned earlier, that was your closest game of the year, 28-22. Where was Evangel at, and what was it like to get out to Evangel for a game?
That's in Springfield, Missouri. Okay. And we played at Missouri State Stadium. It was a big stadium, but they were really talented. They had a lot of drop downs. They had a quarterback from Florida State and numerous drop down kids, really athletic. But they just schematically couldn't handle us. We had some really good stuff offensively and defensively. They had no answer for.
Yeah. And then obviously, you guys play the national title game against Western Washington and just demolish them. I think Jeremy Gardner probably had like 17 touchdowns. I'm just making up stats right now, but you guys put a hurting on them.
Yeah, we got after them. They were a really big school. They ended up moving up to D2 right after that, but they came in very cocky, and we really were able to get after them and cap off a great year.
So before we move on, did you have any teammates that you wanted to throw a shout out to? Any guys that we left off the list? I tried to bring up your offensive line. You mentioned a few defensive players. You mentioned, some of your receivers. Anyone else you want to mention?
I would
be on the spot like this.
Yeah, I would feel like I leave them all out if I start naming. I mean, we just had a collective, like all teams. I mean, all your teammates are so valuable to you. It was a collective group that they're your brothers and you love them. And I mean, you feel the same about all of them.
So after your playing career finished up, successful national championship, did you continue to play baseball then that year, or was that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so I kind of had a weird deal because I was training because I knew my limitations football wise. I knew I wasn't an NFL quarterback, but I had got some feelers with the Arena League was a big thing at that time, and the Barnstormers had brought me in, and then I ended up going over to Europe. But so they were all pursuing me at that time. So Coach Dinnivan let me train, but then I pitched. So he just told me, here's the days you pitch, here's the days your rotation, and so you do your work on the side, and I'm good. So it worked out well. It was a lot of fun, but he still allowed me to kind of pursue playing after college.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. You mentioned you played in Europe, you played in Sioux Falls for a few years. You did the post collegiate thing, and you got into coaching. Along that line, you coached high school football for a while.
Yeah, I coached at Roosevelt. That was my first job. Was I took a job at Washington High School with Kim Nelson, and he didn't have a full-time job for me though. So then Brent DeBoer at Roosevelt calls me and goes, "Hey, I've got a full-time job for you. Do you want to come over here?" And yeah, you bet. So I quickly made the move, and I called Coach Nelson, and I'm like, "Hey, I'm going to go to Roosevelt because they got a full-time job for me. But my knucklehead roommate just got cut from his baseball team in Canton, Ohio, and he's looking for a job. So he'd love to come coach for you." And that was Kalen. So I got Kalen his first coaching job, coaching at sophomore football at Washington High School. And that's what started this whole deal. Now his $1 million contract, it all started at Washington High School.
Yeah, hopefully you're getting some kickbacks from that.
It's in the fine print of the contract. Yeah.
So you started coaching at the high school level. What was the hardest part for you going from being like a national champion, collegiate record-setting quarterback to coaching high school kids?
Oh my God, patience. Saying the same things over and over. My first job was freshman. And after the first week, I was like, I'm not doing this. I can't do this. And thankfully, Brent DeBoer allowed me. I went from freshman to sophomore and sophomore to varsity because I was pulling my hair out coaching those freshmen. And I think high school coaching is the toughest job there is. I've coached high school, college, and then the guys with the Storm. And I thought high school is the most challenging because you got to coach what you have. I mean, you don't recruit kids. With the Storm, I can go out and find guys, cut guys, bring new guys in. You can't do that in high school. You got to coach what you have. And that's why I think our high school guys really have the toughest job. And we have some really good ones around here.
Yeah. I was fortunate enough to coach, a few years at Harrisburg T, and then 5 years at Sioux Falls Lincoln. And so I loved the staffs that I worked with and being able to coach at that level, and it was pretty awesome. So you then started coaching, other levels as well. But when Kalen took over the head coaching job at USF, you got back into coaching at USF. How was that?
Yeah.
What was that like?
It was tough. It was tough because I was coaching the Storm. I was teaching at Roosevelt. And then he was like, "Hey, let's really try to make this work with you helping out. I really want you to coach with us." And I, of course, wanted to coach with him and was excited about coaching college. But, my other obligations made it really difficult. So the first year I did spring ball. I would do meetings. And my guys would have to come in early in the mornings for their meetings, and really well for me. And that's where it was a lot of fun. And we had some great teams. Yeah, we had some really good teams. And I was lucky to just be a part of that great staff and great group of teams that we had during that run.
Did you ever, when Chad Cavender and Lorenzo Brown were playing, did you ever kind of mention like, hey, maybe we should dial them back a little bit so they don't break any of my records?
Thankfully, the conference back then, really, as a coach, you want to put up those statistics. I think coaching is more validating than playing. and with Lorenzo especially, I really felt like with him, our defense was so good. We were so good. And so most of the season with Lorenzo, especially his first year, it was pretty much just go in there and don't screw up. And if we have to punt, that's as good as a long pass because no one is going to move the ball on us. And so we didn't let Lorenzo do very much at all. And that's where I felt like it was kind of a hindrance for him. In fact, this is a true story. We finally unleashed Lorenzo against Morningside, and we even put him back to catch punts. And I'm walking up the press box to for the game, and President Benedetto stops me and he goes, "Hey, do you realize you have Lorenzo Brown back there returning punts?" I'm like, "Well, no, I didn't realize that." Yeah, I mean, people couldn't believe it. We wanted to let them play, and Morningside was good. They were really good. That's the one team we would kind of unleash him.
Well, Kurtiss, I really appreciate you taking some time and talking with us tonight. We had a few comments over here. This is something I don't know if you want to answer a few questions from the crowd, but we'll see what we have here. One of them was Ryan Swanstrom asks, did you play 3 sports all years? And I think you did mention that you kind of got out of basketball towards the end there, but you played baseball.
Yeah, so they let Kalen and I, when we decided to quit playing basketball, we played 3 years of basketball. We coached the JV team. Kalen and I would, and we would fight like crazy to call them. Yeah. But we coached, and I did track 2 years, baseball 3.
Oh,
he would be a phenomenal one. You may have to use subtitle or closed caption it though.
Let's see here. Oh yeah, okay. So Ryan was a teammate of mine, and we had a thing that Coach Sim used to run conditioning. And we loved it when Katie and Kyle showed up at the end of practice because then that meant he got a big old smile on his face and we didn't have to run very hard. So I don't know if you guys had a similar situation or not.
No, they were too little when we were there, and no, he was tough, man, but he had tough love. He had more fun coaching offense than defense because he could really – it was like a chess match for him. He was so good at knowing what the defense was going to do and their tendencies.
All right. Well, Kurtiss, I really appreciate you taking your time. I know we got to go hit our DVRs and watch the rest of the Michael Jordan show that's going on right now. But thanks so much for joining me tonight. Yeah,
thanks for having me. It's great what you're doing. Appreciate it. Especially a time like this. You should be able to get Coach DeBoer on at a time like this. He should have some downtime.
I'll reach out to him.
Yeah. Yep. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you very much.